Welcome to the Path Podcast. It's September 2nd, 2024. My name is Tawny. I'm here with Ak. Hey, Ak.
Hey, Tawny.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We're actually recording on Labor Day.
Yeah.
But, it's just like you said, it's September 2nd. So, it's kind of nice to record on, let me see, a day that either we haven't spent all day working and we're coming off of that, or we're recording before some of us have to run off and go do stuff.
Right. It's almost like this is our real job.
Yeah, and it's cool. I mean, there's some stuff that we're doing it at this time because you actually might have had stuff to do that kind of plans are changing a little bit. So today is a little bit more unplanned for all of us.
Yeah, I'm going up to Bellingham to visit Transition Bikes and see a new model that they're going to launch. So stay tuned for a new model from Transition Bikes. I'm excited.
Yeah. As we were getting ready, Jeff, who's been on the podcast, was rolling out his Smuggler to go ride today.
Pretty blingy.
Yeah. Man, that thing is nice. And I'm really, as we've said many times, we're really enjoying the relays these days.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
So much.
So the past two rides I've gone on, I've ridden the Fluid VLT.
Yeah.
Which is 140. I have it set up 140 in the rear, which is stock, and then 160 on the front, which is 10 millimeters longer. Way more capable bike than it might geometry might reveal, but it is a very different character ride than the relay.
Yeah.
The relay is 170. I have mine 180 on the front.
Yeah.
I think yours 170.
Yep.
And but both bikes are amazing, but that relay is, oh my gosh.
A couple of things we've been talking about, so you're going back and forth between the Fluid VLT and the relay.
Yep.
And I'm going back and forth between a Heckler SL and the relay.
Right.
So I've been noticing that when I ride the relay a lot and then I ride the Heckler SL, there's certain kind of ways that I ride the Heckler SL better after riding the relay. Like more committed to the front wheel.
Right.
More committed to leaning it over. Things that you have to do on the relay.
Right.
And then when I ride the Heckler SL a lot, I find it improving my relay riding in that certain turns and jumps, and there's certain things the Heckler SL does better,
right,
to where it kind of helps me past the kind of barrier to entry for certain moves, and then once I'm doing them, I can do it on the relay too.
Right.
So both bikes both bikes kind of nudge me past certain barriers to entry on certain types of moves, to where when I ride the other bike, it improves my riding on that other bike
for
too.
Sure. Like I think we've talked about, sometimes the longer travel bikes turn jumps into bumps.
Yeah.
And riding the shorter travel bike, you got to be a little more committed on those jumps because you can't just turn them into bumps. And then when you come back to the longer travel bikes, you have that same commitment or thought process. It encourages you to turn it back into a jump. Yeah. Another
thing I noticed between the two is we've talked about the point of diminishing. We've talked about how as a bike gets heavier, it deflects less and it tracks better and it goes downhill better.
Right.
And we've talked about how that continues to be true to a certain point, and then when you go over a certain weight, it starts to become less good on downhill.
Right.
And you start to feel kind of more like a passenger,
right,
and less able to kind of be in, really in control,
right,
more along for the ride. And I feel like my relay is right on, I think it's about 45, 46 pounds with cush core and everything.
Yep, same.
And I think it's like so I think it's my Heckler SL, I can wheelie it and manual it and bunny hop it just with ease. Where the relay, it still takes kind of commitment to do a full manual on it. Like if I've been riding the Heckler SL, the first few times I try to manual the relay, I don't get the front wheel very high off the ground.
Got it.
But at like a certain speed, so at slow and mid speeds, I guess what I'm getting at is that point of kind of negative returns on the bike getting heavier and not being as good for downhill. I think it starts at a lower weight at mid and slow speeds. So like at mid and low speeds, I feel like the Heckler SL descends better. So like tight trails and techie low speed stuff and jumps and anything kind of where maneuverability helps.
Right.
The Heckler SL is like a clear win over the relay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on that.
And
what's the reach on the Heckler SL?
I think it's like 463 or something. It's actually a really nice reach for me.
Yeah. It's probably longer by 8 millimeters than the relay. I think the relay's 455.
And like, so it's kind of in between the relay and my switchblade, which I do feel like the switchblade at about 468 is kind of pushing my reach. Like sometimes I feel a little stretched out on it on climbs, especially on flat ground.
Yeah.
I was thinking about running higher bars. I think that's going to be the ticket for me on that. I think I was going to bring this up later in the show, but I've been thinking a lot about this. There seems to be a trend in the industry towards higher bars. And not just for riders of a certain age, but for everybody. Because as I've gotten older, my bars have gotten higher. But I think it's been a long time at the path that we've been sort of advocating the higher bar revolution, going all the way back to when all bikes came with flat bars and we put riser bars on every customer's bike, Ozonic double walls.
Right.
But I think we're in a kind of a resurgence of the high bar revolution. In other words, they got to a certain point of height and stayed there for a while, and now they're getting higher again.
And there's some fitness court training that's going on as well that might be impacting that. Dak Norton is God, I forget the name of this, but it's kind of this holding yourself more like vertically, like giving all your internal space to breathe and space to move, and like how that impacts. I was talking to Luke.
Biomechanical support for the theory.
Correct. Yeah. And Dak Norton is kind of full into that. And so
there's that. It's also, as the reaches get longer, taller bars kind of offset that in a way. Right. Without giving up some of the benefits of the longer reach, I think.
Right.
So that's I do think there's kind of a correlation between longer reaches and taller bars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And man, I wonder if that the longer reach on the Heckler SL and on the Fluid VLT, the pivot as well, also encourages kind of that balanced forward space,
like moving your weight forward.
Yeah, and
make space for it.
Yeah, and so is that even playing into when we come back to the relays, which has a slightly shorter reach, but needs you to be over the front because
it's
longer.
Really interesting that you say that, because I definitely find that when I get back on the relay after riding my other bikes, I have to kind of recommit my weight to the front wheel.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is, I'm running my relay in the PNW setting and in the low setting.
Right.
Which is kind of not recommended.
Right.
But it's very much low bottom bracket and shifts your weight back.
Yeah.
But what I found about that is I kind of like, it's trade-offs, but one of the things I like about it is that there's no question about what needs to happen.
Right.
What needs to happen is I need to get my weight up over the bars, and I need to do it with, if there comes a point where it's too much, kind of the default mode, if I just almost just relax a little bit, I'm back over the rear wheel.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it doesn't take much because the bias is back towards the rear wheel. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like this ride concept of the natural bias is towards the rear wheel, and it's the rider's responsibility to get
forward.
weight on the front wheel.
Yeah.
What that creates is this dynamic of real kind of assertive rider position. Like you have to be in that assertive up over the bars position.
Intentionality about putting yourself there.
Which I feel like that's one of the ways in which riding that bike benefits me on the Heckler SL is I find myself a little more committed when I get on the Heckler SL because because you have to be that committed on the relay.
Yeah.
And it's good for the riding to be committed like that.
Right.
And the Heckler SL is long enough and low enough and slack enough that at least so far I haven't had to pay.
Don't say it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's something like it all fits in. Another way to say I think what we're saying is that longer reach on the Heckler SL and the Fluid VLT and others makes those bikes is part of making those bikes feel more capable than the geometry and travel numbers might reveal.
Yeah, and I think I think part of that too to remember is that increasing the reach puts your front wheel further out in front of you. Mm-hmm. So does slackening your head angle.
Right.
And slackening the head angle also slows the steering down, but kind of so does having a longer front center, just not as much. Mm-hmm. And it definitely gives it that committing to the front wheel is further forward over the bottom bracket vibe.
Right. I think so. Does some of this also play into like the Fairline cranks that we're riding these days are 150? So that longer reach, not putting your back foot so far behind you, to me seems like possibly gives you the ability to like be more natural being forward. Like same. If you put your body in the same position and just push your back foot out further, harder for you to feel natural.
100%.
So,
yeah, you have, you can only get so far ahead of your back foot, especially if you have leg length limitations like we do.
Right. That flexibility, if you can't flex that heel and ankle.
Yeah. So there's only so far you can go from your most rearward point of balance.
So having 150 cranks helps that.
Another kind of almost the inverse of what you just said. When you're kind of a little bit like a long, steep, chunky section or a trail that has a lot of long, steep, chunky, you ever get your front thigh start to burn?
Oh yeah.
Because you're kind of back and that front thigh isn't really, your front leg is really supporting a lot of weight, but not in a super biomechanically strong way.
Yes.
And your front thigh starts to burn. So that's way less with shorter cranks.
Correct.
Like I have not really noticed that with shorter cranks.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is.
And it's the same thing. It's your front leg. Instead of talking about your back leg not being so far behind you, it's your front leg isn't
being
so
closer
far in
front of you. So
your knee angle and everything is more of strong. You have a stronger position.
Yeah. So, and kind of pivoting onto the Fairlines. I know we haven't even talked about shop news or anything about like that. I'm kind of excited because I've been pedaling the Fairlines more. So I've been intentional about putting like 18 to 20 mile rides on the Fairlines.
So at first you were pretty into them on the downhill, but you were kind of feeling like they were holding you back on the climbs.
Yep.
And now
I'm not sure if I was racing XC, if I'd run 50, if I had like a Racer Boy bike. I'm not
You
sure.
might run longer cranks than 150s.
150s, but maybe not too much longer. And a couple of things that have happened. One, I think just time spinning circles is very helpful. It really enforces that behavior. The other things that happened was, 20 mils on each crank is a lot of space. And
you went from 170s.
I went from 170s down to 150s. And the first thing I did was I raised my seat about 20 mils. And at first I was like, this feels sort of right. I hadn't raised my seat. But then first thing I did was raise that seat, and I was like, oh, okay, that extension feels a lot better. But then at the start of this last ride, I was feeling like, it's that thing where shortening the cranks is going to put your knee over pedal spindle in a different position as well. And so I pushed my saddle back.
Yeah.
As far as it could go.
Okay.
And that I feel like actually did help a lot as well.
Nice.
I think for me, I was feeling like, and I don't know if this is even right, but pushing the saddle back helped me to do that. At 60%, you start to like pivot your hips forward.
Yep.
Pushing my saddle back helped that with the shorter cranks.
Interesting.
And so I feel like re-engaging the glutes and using the right power helps to mitigate that sense of the steeper a trail becomes, the more important torque, the torque aspect of it becomes. Yes. And you are losing a little bit of torque on the shorter cranks.
That's true if you don't change the chainring to offset it.
Correct, and I haven't changed the chainring.
You can go to a lower gearing and keep the same torque.
Correct.
If I understand physics.
Yeah. And so, so that's what I was on this last ride. I did that, shifted the saddle back. And so there's a number of things going on. 3 different changes: getting used to just pedaling in smaller circles, raising my saddle, and then in this last ride, I pushed the saddle back as far as it would go.
Yeah.
All these things, it's really feeling more natural.
I think a lot of it is mental.
It is.
I think it's everything you said, but I think a lot of it's mental
It
too.
is mental. Pedaling in smaller circles, there's the mental part of that. One, there's a biomechanical version that actually you need to learn to do that. But then mentally, you need to get off I'm riding my tricycle again.
Yeah. I think I have about maybe 13 or 14 hours on the 150s at this point, give or take. So like 6 rides or something,
right.
7 rides. I don't know. Maybe
Probably,
that many.
I'm probably about the same.
Maybe a little less. I feel like I'm kind of starting to not notice it. Right. I'd be curious to see if I went back to 165s, if I would climb better. My fitness has improved a little bit since I put the 150s on. So that kind of creates, a curveball in the experiment.
Yeah. And you've probably shed about 15-ish pounds.
Something like that. Yeah. So that probably makes more difference than shorter cranks. But when I first put them on, I definitely had the mental kind of like, am I going anywhere? Do I have enough torque?
Right.
These circles feel small. It feels weird.
Right.
Right now when I ride that bike, I don't notice that.
Yep.
In fact, it kind of feels normal, and I wonder what bigger
cranks
it's going to
feel
feel like.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think I do notice that while there's a loss of torque, there is, if you complete a pedal stroke, the other pedal stroke is right there quicker. It's kind of hard to explain.
Right. The power band, it's a shorter time between the other foot coming into that power band.
Right.
Yeah.
Or another way I think Roadies described that as it's quicker to spin up to speed.
Yeah. But when you're pointed this is what I was thinking. The steeper the climb, I think it fights against that phenomenon because you can't spin up to speed. You're just like everything you do
unless you lower the gearing,
right, just to get it into that. Which is an interesting. I've been doing this thing where with the 150s, like tight spacing on cassettes is I don't know, maybe more important because I notice between what's gear 2 on the 12 speed axis. Eagle.
Boy, I don't know.
It's like 51 down to something like, I don't know.
It's a big jump.
Yeah, 47 or 46.
Yeah.
Like with the 50s, I feel like 150s, I feel like there's a gear in between those two.
You want another gear.
Just right in between those. Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's really interesting. I'm glad that that's coming in, and every time I hop on the non-e-bike, I feel like I wish we had made some of these for the e-bike, the 150s. I think 150s on an e-bike for me is going to be
maybe soon.
Yeah.
I'm actually waiting for some info back from the engineer on what it would cost to take our arm profile and make them Fazua motor compatible.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty fantastic.
Younger Zach, we have 2 Zachs at the shop. And
okay.
Younger Zach is also riding the 150 Farrowline cranks.
Oh, nice.
And he feels like they help him on the climbs.
Whoa.
And he says he doesn't notice much difference on the descent. I suspect that when he was running 175s. I suspect that when he puts his 175s back on, he will notice the difference on the descent.
Right.
That's when I first really noticed it, is when going back.
You went back. Yeah. A/B testing. Yeah.
Any other new observations?
No, those are some good ones. I think, there's other stuff that I'm into, but how about some shop news?
Yeah, one real quick on the crank length thing.
Totally.
I have noticed I've noticed some slight, Longer cranks, when the outside foot is down, it's more down.
Yeah.
And that's a disadvantage in that your feet are more kind of spread out and your knees are kind of more at an angle and everything. But it's an advantage in the sense that gets your center of gravity lower and weights the bike for the turn really nicely.
Yeah.
So it's not. There are ways in which the longer cranks do certain things better, even downhill.
Yeah.
Overall, I don't feel like that trade-off is a full win, but it is interesting to note that, like, sometimes I feel like I'm not, like, that is a spot where I occasionally feel good on the longer, like, I'm running 165 still on my e-bike, right? Because I don't have any in stock.
Right.
And I do notice that getting that outside foot down lower is kind of nice sometimes.
And I was thinking, like, but see, 165s still give you the ability to get that outside pedal completely, like, at the 6 o'clock and break the plane with the bike.
Right.
I mean, I think there's a point where maybe 175s is getting harder, even though it's, like, fully out, getting harder to break the plane. So, like, is there a law of diminishing returns on that?
Well, and as that top knee has to bend so much because
Exactly.
your feet are so far apart,
Right.
you get really out of position. And
Yeah, I think saying the same thing. Yeah, similar.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I wonder if that 165 is that point where, because in the past, 165 was the crank for downhillers.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure 150 to 155 is where I'm going to end up.
On the
Maybe
e-bike,
160 on an XC bike.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. See, but the thing is, I don't know if I'm ever going to ride enough to say, like, okay, I'm going to go 160 instead of 155. I think I might end up at 155 on my XC / downcountry bike.
Yeah, and then also just giving a nod to the idea that, there was a time, for a very long time, 50 millimeters was short, very short for a stem.
Right.
And then it kind of became the standard length. And for a long time, I felt a little uncomfortable on anything shorter than 50 millimeters. But these days, 40 is pretty normal.
Yep. 43 is.
Yeah.
44,
So,
yep.
maybe we're just even still scratching the surface of how short our cranks are going to end up. Don't know.
Oh, gosh.
145.
145 on an e-bike. Why not?
Right? We'll see.
Maybe that's where we should test on an e-bike is 145s, not 150s.
Oof. I don't know if I'm ready. As much as I'm kind of advocating for the concept in real life, I don't know if I'm ready.
I go for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a place for it for sure. Either people who are further evolved than me, or there are people who, people come in all sizes and shapes.
That's true. But if we're going to test it, we're testing 150s. If we're going to test it, why not go push for that bookend?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe we will.
So should we hop on to shop news?
Yeah.
There's the World Cup. The World Cups were recently, so
World
there might
Championships.
be not just World Cup, World Championships. So there might be some observations on that.
I always find this interesting. We have World Cup racing, which is a series.
Yeah,
And then we have World Championships, which is a single race.
which is within the World Cup.
So you can be the world champion of the World Cup where you win the series, or you can be the world champion where you win the world championships.
The one single race.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, mountain biking. I wonder, is road biking? I don't know if road biking has the same.
Sadly, neither do I.
I don't think they do.
Did you see Loris Vergier won?
Oh, man. Angry style.
I went back and listened
Yeah.
to a little bit of our podcast that had Loris Vergier.
Right.
Pretty awesome. He really is one of the best guests. Like, we had him with Greg Menard and Lucas Shaw, right? And, like, what a treat. Like,
Oh, right.
how rad that we had the Syndicate on 6 years ago.
Has it been
It's been
years?
I believe it was 6 years ago.
I still have that signed hat by those three,
Yeah.
just hanging on my wall.
But Vergier was the kind of he was funny. He had really cool insights. I really, like you pointed out, he had that comment about riding angry that was just so awesome. It's just cool to see him win. Ever since I was already kind of a fan, but ever since he's been on this show, I've kind of followed his career. And
I am the same way. I'm the same way.
It's really cool to see him win.
Shout out to Loris.
Good job, Loris.
Yeah, and yeah, he was the one he had the insights about how riders have more favorite tracks than others.
Yep.
And the more techie versus the more pedally type of, and I think he was saying something along the lines of like, he's going to embrace them all.
Yep.
Okay, he didn't say that, but paraphrasing the intent.
Yep. Pretty awesome.
I can't believe he hasn't. Is this his first one? I think it might be.
I believe it is.
Yeah, so I can't believe.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, that was so. Shout out to Loris. You know what I did notice? I've been following the, on Pink Bike they have all the tech randoms from. So I did notice that there's a couple pictures of guys with flats.
Flat pedals.
No. Flat
Flat
tires. What is the thing that's missing in every one of those pictures?
Cushcore?
An insert. None of the flats have inserts. I think I said that right. Yeah.
None of the people who got flats were running inserts.
Correct.
As far as you could tell.
Correct. So I wonder if that's helping.
I mean, I think it's pretty well understood that inserts help reduce flats.
Yep, and flats. Not just ripping the tire off the rim, but also flats. I saw one that was flat and clearly didn't have an insert because it was just flat against the ground.
Yep.
And then one with the tire just off the rim and clearly no insert.
Right. So, like Cushcore will help keep the tire on the bike and not burp air.
Yep.
But it will also help reduce kind of pinch flats where the tire gets split open from hitting the rim so hard.
Correct.
And it kind of protects the bead area a little bit too, I feel like.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, I get less flats with Cushcore. I'm confident of that.
I do too.
And actually, probably knock on some wood, I don't think I've had a flat with Cushcore.
Only when you had zero sealant in it.
Right. There was that ride we went on where I turned around.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you had told me about that. I was not with you on that ride, but yeah, you had told me about that. I've learned from your mistake. But it is interesting how, like, we talk about Cushcore with the performance aspects of it, not so much from the
rim protection and tire protection.
Yep. But I think that is a benefit that they're seeing at the World Cups.
100%.
I don't know if I've ever run into a situation where I've pushed my tire to that point where it would have ripped off without Cushcore versus with Cushcore.
But you've burped a tire.
I have, but it's been a long time since I burped a tire, but I am riding mostly inserts.
I mean, I think burping a tire is kind of the entry point to ripping your tire off.
That is true. Another observation that I saw was on World Cup, SRAM flight attendant on downhill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, boxers and the coil.
A lot of it?
Man, well, more than just one or two. I think Valley Hull, I mess up her name, is running. Did she win? Yeah, she won. So she's running that. I think Loic Bruni is running it. So I was thinking, where does that really come into play? I love flight attendant. I'm a proponent of flight attendant, but on the downhill in the World Cup even, it's interesting. I mean, I could totally see on pedally sections, they never show it, on the TV or on the clips because that's not the exciting part, but every point where you're pedaling.
There's that, but it's also, I kind of think of it this way. If you hit a bump and you go through 2 inches of travel,
right,
that's 2 inches of travel that you don't have in the bank anymore,
right,
until the wheel until it re-extends and you recover.
Yep.
So there's that moment of less in the bank.
Yep. Right.
And so if you have technology that helps your suspension move when it should, but not when it shouldn't. Oh my gosh. It's like keeping money in the bank.
Golly.
It's like keeping suspension in the bank.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's kind of what they're tuning for on this flight attendant. I hadn't thought about that. So with flight attendant is it's supposedly adjusting so many times so quickly that it's the keeping in the bank phenomenon that possibly.
And it also might help pump some rollers instead of just absorbing it in the travel.
Right.
Might help pump a jump or a lip or any kind of a transition.
Right.
Man, and
if
keep that suspension travel in the bank while you're doing it, so to speak.
So if every roller you're pumping the backside on it, every time you go to pump the backside of something, you don't squish so much, but you're able to like translate your energy straight into that. That's picking up a little more, and that's way more than just pedaling, let alone the pedally sections of these. I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, or even just pedaling hard, and you might get some suspension out of the bank from pedal bob.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's in my mind the main place that I've been that I think about, and I think that's where most people think about, but perhaps it's the adjusting to firm up on the pumping the backsides and keeping in the bank in suspension movement.
And I think this kind of goes to rebound speed too. Like we know I'm kind of a fan of slower rebound speeds.
Yep.
But I like to understand the full balance of the conversation, and I think one of the big benefits of higher rebound speeds is you get that suspension back on the bank quicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another way of saying that is
you don't pack
suspension recovers faster.
Yeah. Man, I wonder if that's okay. I've been into apps these days. Like literally, I think only in the past, maybe since our last podcast, have I installed the SRAM Axis app on my phone.
It's
as well as
funny. We were talking about this on the last ride, and I didn't say anything, but in my head, I was having this conversation with myself about. It's weird that Ock hasn't been embracing these apps, because in my mind, you're kind of an early adopter, and you're the type to embrace the full technology and learn about it and learn its in my mind.
It's a weird Luddite. I was like a Luddite in this space, like holding on to old things.
It's like counter to. And so I was thinking about that, and I was like, I wonder why that is, and I have a theory.
Okay.
Maybe there's a natural trajectory with this kind of technology where as it comes on and you embrace it and you embrace it and you embrace it, there comes this point of kind of like almost like app burnout or like app overwhelm, or like
losing control of like an intuition of what's going on with my bike.
That might be it too. So I kind of pictured you. I had this idea of like, my first thought is it's out of character for Ock to be kind of behind me on downloading apps.
Okay.
And then my second thought is maybe he's ahead of me. Maybe he's going through the downturn in downloading apps that comes after being ahead of everyone for so long.
Right.
And like kind of going through that, like too many apps in my life that we're all headed for, maybe.
Right. Okay, here's another, I'll build on that. People make that observation about me at work as well. Man, you always have the coolest new tech and this, that, and the other thing. And I'd say to people, it's not that I have the new tech, and which is true, I do, but I'm also the first to abandon new tech. If it's just not helping, I quickly go like, nah, that's not it. That's more of a distraction. I'm done.
Interesting.
And so I think with the apps like Flow for Bosch and SRAM Axis, when I first kind of just looked at it, I was like, I don't even see the benefit. And so I was just moved on, and I'm developing the intuition about ride duration and mapping that on to percent remaining and, time and effort and all of this. So, but then there's just been a couple things where I was like, oh man, like changing batteries, and it's not even changing the main Axis batteries. It's changing the little
the shifter battery.
The shifter battery, like the coin batteries.
Yep.
And when those go out, you're toast. And those have gone out a couple times in the past month.
They usually last about a year, I feel like.
Yeah, or maybe even a little longer, what have you. And so I was kind of like, all right, I'm going to put on the app so that this allows me to look at all the coin batteries. And that has definitely helped. But when I look at it now, man, like flight attendant, you could do all the adjustments on, low compression speed for the fork and the shock. You can do all that manually and just watch it on your fork and what have you. But all of that is right here in the Axis app.
So you can tune your compression damping in the app.
And
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I was doing it the other day, and you could hear it cycling through. Yeah, it's cool, like adjusting the low speed compression.
Wow.
And you can adjust the bias of, like, is it going to be more biased to open or more biased to firm? I have mine set totally to the most open bias possible. And there's just a whole bunch of other functions in there.
I'll take flight attendant, easy on the flight attendant.
Easy on the flight attendant. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I am, I'm eager to see like the downhill, and I'm wondering, because flight attendant, the app can adjust manually, quote manually, adjust the low speed compression. I wonder if in the downhill flight attendant version that they're trying to figure out how to do that on the fly without, based on all the accelerometers, adjusting low speed compression, helping that saving some in the bank phenomenon.
Yeah, interesting.
Golly,
bikes are fun. So much technology.
They are. So that new Bronson,
really good looking bike. I think we just kind of said it was coming.
Yeah. So shop has those in stock?
We do. Did you notice that it has no cable routing for a rear derailleur?
Man. Yeah. And seeing that the only one fully electronic shifting right now is SRAM, I wonder if that says something about Shimano. Maybe. Do you remember when we first talked about the idea of a bike with no cable routing for a rear derailleur on this podcast? Gosh, how long ago was that?
I think it was after I first rode AXS for the first time on my pink Mega Tower.
Oh my gosh.
Probably. I think it was on that bike.
Yeah. On the fry sauce.
Right.
Man, that's got to be, let's see, we've been doing this almost 10 years. So that's got to be...
I think it was 6 years ago. I think it was 2018.
Oh, my gosh.
So...
And we finally arrived.
We've called a lot of stuff on this podcast. And honestly, when I said that in 2018, I kind of had this is a wacky idea that probably could maybe happen, but I didn't. I guess what I'm saying is, we talked about the possibility and we kind of speculated that maybe someday it would happen.
Yeah.
But it didn't really seem like there was a clear path to that.
Right.
It seemed pretty kind of like wild and out there idea.
Yeah, for sure.
And now it's happening.
Yeah. I mean, that cable routing holes in the frames might be going the way of the front derailleur.
Might be.
And
that's funny that you say that. I was talking to our friend Andrew from Shimano yesterday on the ride, and we were talking about this exact topic, and he was like, yeah, but it really kind of eliminates there's all these potential benefits to a cabled shifting system, and some people are still going to want it, and maybe you just need to get the engineering right. And, and I was like, I think I remember you saying all this about front derailleurs. And he made some good points about why this is different. But,
yeah. So there's that. It's so interesting how, are we going to come not full circle? I don't believe that history is totally cyclical, but maybe spiraling upwards type of thing, where we at one time had no ability to route cables internally. And now we've routed everything internally.
Yep.
And now we're at a point where the Bronson has eliminated the ability to route your shifter cables internally. I wonder if brake cables are going to come back out and just get routed externally. Do you think that's too much of an aesthetic that's not going to happen?
I also think that
it's just one cable.
I also think that internal routing for brake cables has led to less damage to brake cables.
I see what you're saying.
So there is an actual functional benefit.
Yeah, sure.
It protects the cable from smashes.
Yeah.
Smash incidents and rip incidents.
Right. So the Bronson has two holes in it then. One for the rear cable and one for the seat Or maybe it's just one semi-large hole.
And I wonder if you could, I guess we should look closer.
Yeah.
I think they do like discrete entry points for one cable on Santa Cruz from what I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you could run a wireless dropper and then maybe still run an internal routed rear derailleur, at least to the rear triangle.
Rear brake, right.
I guess, maybe.
Yeah, you could have a very small hole just for the rear brake, and just call that good.
Yeah. So another thing that's different about the new Bronson is that it's got all the kind of modern updates, a little bit longer, a little bit slacker.
Yeah.
Santa Cruz keeps reducing the amount of anti-squat in their bikes.
Oh, interesting.
So it has less anti-squat, less chain growth, less of a maybe O-chain need.
Right. I wonder, another flight attendant application. Like,
oh right, you don't need as much anti-squat if you have a flight attendant. That's probably true. Yeah. I also think it's I think it's a trend towards more towards plusher suspension that that is especially plush when the chain's loaded up.
Right. It's only tangentially related. Suntour also has an electronic suspension.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Who was running that? One of the World Cup downhillers is running an electronic Suntour suspension.
Huh. I wonder if that's aftermarket yet.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've never seen it.
Fox had it. What was Fox's called again? Pro pedal? No, I'm kidding. I'm stuck on pro pedal.
Yeah.
Electronic pro pedal.
Mission control? No, that's not right. I don't know why I have such a block on this.
Because I said pro pedal?
Yeah.
Sorry. The anti-inception.
Oh, well.
Just to insert the... But it'll be interesting to see the development of that. But that Bronson, 150, 160, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, 150, 160. Still has the horizontal low shock, low mounted shock.
It's got kind of like triangular windows in the truss that goes around the shock, which I think looks good. And it's a good looking bike, and that translucent kind of reddish color is really good looking.
Yeah. Yeah, just like the there's a couple of in that space, just like the Giant Trans. We talked about it last time, I think. The new Giant Trans SX, Advanced SX, 145 rear travel, 160 on the front. It's really interesting. I think the part spec on that bike is really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on that bike. A little longer. It has the built-in reach adjustment, which is amazing. That's cool. Reach flip chip. You can run it both in 2929 or MX. A little slacker, so a little longer. But the part spec on that, there's only one build on that, on the SX. And it comes with it's 5,700, I think, is the retail here at the shop. And it comes with the Fox 36 Elite fork and the Elite rear shock as well.
And that's the new Grip 2 damper in that fork too.
Yep. And those are, I mean, essentially that's the factory. It's the factory without the cash money coating.
Right. Factory fork, no Kashima.
Yeah. And but then all the other specs totally functional. But I think it's like the Dior. They don't make Dior anymore brakes, but kind of that Dior level brakes and SX, I think, drivetrain. So that really helps to make it a really reasonable price.
Zach, our tech wizard and podcast fame person, just got one.
Oh, nice.
And I kind of got one too. I wanted to have one for a demo, and Giant wasn't doing a demo program. So I got one, but they were like, "Hey, if it's for you, we'll give you a good deal." And so I was like, "Yeah, it's for me," because I like it is like I'm going to ride it as my bike, but I'm going to put it in the demo fleet too.
Right.
So we'll have that for demo soon. I'm excited about that.
That is cool.
Pretty, that bike for me, it's light for category. It's like about 30 pounds.
Yep.
Maybe with some nicer parts on it. I'm not sure if it's 30 pounds at that spec.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I know the one level that we have in stock with dual 29, but the same frame is about 30 pounds.
Oh, got it.
And if you check out our YouTube, we just did a video on the dual 29.
Oh, version. Nice. Right. That is a really good looking bike.
Yeah.
That paint job on that bike. Yeah. Anyways.
So I'm excited to ride that bike. I feel like it's sort of the bike I've been looking. It's like the bike I've been trying to make.
Yeah.
And like it's what I tried to turn my other Trance into.
Yep. Yeah, I have the Trance SE and I've resisted getting a different bike because the Trance SE is very close to being what I've been trying to make it into.
10 millimeters or so longer reach and mixed wheel compatible and reach flip chip and
all those things.
Glove box or storage,
frame
storage. It's not a ton of storage in there.
It's
something. It's enough, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting. Speaking of the glove box, I don't know why I've been thinking about this more frequently. Maybe it's because you and I went riding the other day, and at least you asked before we went on the ride, "Hey, does anyone have a pump in their little hip sack?" And so I always ride with mine, and so you rode with a minimalist hip sack.
I was thinking of not. I was like, maybe I don't need to bring all my tools on this ride.
Right,
and I
because
checked around and I didn't.
Yeah, two of the three of us had it, and that's totally adequate for the ride that we did. But I was looking at Synchros has a bottle cage with a trail tool and a pump that all mounted in there. Who else has something like that? Giant might have one. Oh,
Fix Manufacturing.
Just
came out with something pretty cool like that.
That's actually what got me thinking about it. I saw Fix's. That looks like a really cool solution. And then looking at the glove box made me think about, and every time I look at my little hip sack, I think I'd like to shed just a little bit of weight, but then I look and I'm like, well, I have my two Tubolito tubes in there. I've got, a pump, a tool, just the minimum. And it's still just a little heavy. I'll put that on the bike. I'd be happy to put that on the bike.
I was riding with Andrew yesterday, and he asked me, he's like, that black mark down the middle of your hip sack, is that from your rear tire buzzing it? I was like, yeah, it is. And he's like, oh, that's shred signaling. And I was like, or maybe goon signaling. and then we kind of talked a little bit about the kind of the fuzzy, kind of vague line between shred signaling and
goon signaling.
Being a dork.
Being a dork.
I guess it's a little subjective. But yeah, I do find that the hip sack is often kind of the first thing to hit the rear tire, especially if, over the course of the ride, sometimes the belt comes a little loose and it starts to sag a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Or you just don't know the difference. And
it is nice.
You just embrace the dork.
Tools on you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Just embrace the dork. Dork signaling.
I feel like there's a good joke in there somewhere. Something about my ex or something. Wish she would have been able to embrace the dork. So, other shop news. We're hiring.
That's right.
And we're hiring for someone to come hang out with us at these podcasts because Jake, our podcast producer, video recorder, editor, sound engineer, kind of the person who makes the podcast happen, has to go do other stuff, and we need someone new for this position.
Yep.
So the position is come to the podcast and set up the equipment twice a month, and then make sure it records properly, and then edit it and post it. And we can train someone on the kind of Libsyn and posting it and getting it published side.
Yep.
But we're looking for someone who does have experience, particularly
editing
video.
Yeah.
I think video editing experience is the main
Yeah.
key skill set that we're looking for.
Yeah.
So this could be kind of a very part-time gig, or it could also be the person who does a lot of our video content for Instagram and for our web catalog and for
Right.
YouTube and for the rest of our marketing and storytelling, which that would be like potentially 30 to 40 hours a week with benefits and a 401k. And
Right.
so we have we have 2 positions open. It could be 1 position for the right person.
Right.
So either 2 part-time positions or 1 full-time position.
Yeah.
And they're kind of the same skill set is why it could be 1 position.
Sure.
And that skill set, again, is mainly that you're proficient and fairly efficient at video editing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, selfishly, I'm always sad when we, especially Jake, we've been working with you for a couple of years. I'm sad about that, but excited to see your new endeavors and always encouraging. I'm looking off camera at Jake, but we have nothing but best wishes and experiences with Jake.
I say this with like, there aren't a lot of people. Jake's been flawless.
Yeah.
Jake has been flawless in his role. It's awesome to work with awesome people.
Yeah.
Hopefully we find someone else awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So you said it's twice a month, and then twice a year there's 3 times a month.
Oh, good point. That's a really good point. It's every other week.
It's every other week.
It's twice a month plus 2.
Plus 2. Yeah, twice a month, and then twice a year. Then there's 3 times a month.
So typically we record every other Wednesday at around 6:30.
Right.
That is actually flexible. That's partly based on Jake's schedule.
Right.
So that could be your schedule if you come on board with us, or we could talk about a different schedule. Like sometimes Hawk and I like to record early on a Sunday.
Right.
For example.
Right.
So Hawk and I do have some other windows available. But yeah, someone who's stoked to come in and the other part of the job is that you take notes on the podcast and kind of compile the podcast notes.
Right.
So
yeah, that's great. Hopefully we find somebody. Looking forward to working with a new person as well.
Yep. Other shop news, 18 months no interest for the month of September with Synchrony Financial.
It's fantastic. Take advantage.
Yep. And then until daylight savings time, we still have shop rides that you can check out on our website. You go to click on ride across the top right there and click down and see the different rides that we have coming up.
I think you got another couple months of that, so I'll be sad because we do ride in the evenings, and we've noticed that even daylight is getting a little bit shorter.
Yep. Other news, we finally got Bosch range extenders in.
Yes.
So this is the PowerMore 250. It fits all Bosch smart systems. The ones we got have the 150 mil connecting cable, which means the cable is a little short for a fluid VLT. We found out
that is true. You need about 75 millimeters longer, but I think the next size up on the cord is a 300. So
the standard way for us to order this will be that we order the battery and the accessory separately, so that we order the accessory that fits your bike.
Right.
Right now, we got them as a kit. It's the right length accessory for Pivot because we got them from Pivot.
Right.
But it's going to be the right length for other bikes too.
Yeah, for sure.
Just case by case.
Yep.
So the ones we have in stock right now have the 150 cable.
It has the 150 cable on it. Correct.
It's exciting. I mean, we've been talking about a Bosch range extender forever.
For months. Actually, for maybe
years.
For a couple of years.
Yeah. So that's exciting.
And okay, so even if you do have a fluid VLT, as long as you're not running a shock with a piggyback, I think you can put, like, I think you had mentioned Wolf, B-Rad,
Something
extender.
There's a couple things on the market that allow you to kind of move your cage around. It's like something that bolts to your water bottle cage mounts that has like some flexibility to bolt your cage to that.
Correct.
I think that would solve your problem if the range extender didn't interfere with your piggyback on your shock.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Other interesting, that's kind of it for shop news. Sometimes sometimes there's just things I notice about technique and fundamentals that I like to share on the show. And like recently I've been thinking a lot about kind of ankle position and dropping the heels and raising the feet and
Right.
pointing the toes and dropping the heels and what they both do and everything. Lately, I've been really noticing, and we've talked about this on the show before, but it's been years, and it's one of those like,
It's a good reminder.
it's a good reminder, and it's something that as I incorporate kind of intentionally doing this into my riding again more, I'm noticing the benefit of it.
Yeah.
And it's pushing, if you're in a turn, it's, say you're turning right, it's taking your right hand and pushing it down.
Right.
And what it does is it's like a slight counter steer.
Yep.
And it leans the bike over.
Correct.
And it's such an effective technique.
Yeah. You know who you know who told me that technique? I think it might have even been before you and I talked about pushing down, is when my younger was like 6 or 7, right after my son learned how to ride a bike, and I was telling him, you do that thing to show people counter steering is sit up and ride lightly with your hands on your, and if you want to turn right, push forward with your right hand.
Yeah.
And it's, again, counterintuitive, but it leans the bike and it makes you turn. So I was telling my sons, like, to do that, push forward.
Yeah.
And then as we were kind of doing figure eights on the street, he's like, they call me Dedo. He's like, Dedo, it's push down. He's like, if you push down, it's better. I was like, oh my gosh, that's right.
He intuited it.
Yeah. He's like, it's not forward, it's down. I was like, oh yeah, that's great. So anyways, counter steer. So keep on. Sorry.
I love that kind of like beginner's mind knowledge.
Right.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as an experience, so how has that more recently helped you in your like intentional form and what have you riding? Because I've been thinking this too.
I feel like I was having some trouble getting the bike to lean over in certain turns, and I was having trouble. I was understeering sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't want to correct for that by turning the handlebars, right?
Because the temptation is to turn your handlebar.
Right. Like in the opposite of counter steering.
Correct. And it makes the situation even worse.
It can stand the bike up.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think the way that I think most people can most intuitively relate to this is, if you're riding along and you sort of start to lose your balance to the right and you just turn to the right, it brings you back upright.
Yeah.
That's what's going on.
Exactly.
Right? Like, you want to lean over and you're turning to the right, it's bringing you back upright.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's how I've been thinking about it is, with the ankles and the crank length and the little longer reach and this like little more balanced forward position, you kind of get your elbows up, right? And then when you're cornering, what I was noticing happen sometimes is in that position, when I feel like I'm understeering, I want to push forward with my outside arm, almost to make it a little more aggressive, like get a little bit more forward. But if you're pushing forward with your right side, with your outside arm, you're really standing the bike up.
You can be.
And so even though
it's
you feel
a fine line though, because weighting that outside grip can help weight the tire and make traction.
I agree, but I think the most efficient way to accomplish that is to push down with the inner.
Well, you have to push down with the inner. You can also push down with the outer.
But I think what happens for me is when I'm thinking push down with the outer is it's actually pushing it forward a little bit.
Right.
And so what you want to do is stand on the end of the, in my mind, I think like stand on the end of the outside handlebar. That's the pushing down, like pushing down.
Or even as you're pushing the inside grip down to the ground, also be twisting the handlebars towards the outside grip.
Correct.
Is kind of a traction.
Correct. But pushing down on the inside naturally weights the outside. That's what I mean. Like in my effort to weight the outside, I'm actually pushing it forward. But when I push down with the bar and being intentional about that, I'm like, oh, it really is putting me in the right position.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
yeah,
it's just a shift in mentality about like what you're doing in it.
Yeah, and just really paying attention to that outside grip getting pushed towards the ground.
Correct.
Yeah, correct. Or inside grip, I mean.
Yeah, and it's not pushing it it's not pushing it down as in towards the other grip. it's pushing it down as if you're pushing
the outside grip when
Yeah,
the
the
one that you're
outside
using
grip.
right. It's like
Right.
it's really, if you think of twisting the
Yeah.
twisting the handlebars, kind of, or like
Yeah. See, it's
pulling.
yeah.
You're pushing the inside grip towards the ground, but you're also pulling it away from the bike a little bit at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah, exactly. And the outside one, the outside grip generation is like a line that goes through the center of the earth.
Right.
And that is different than the line through the bars.
Right. Right.
So,
Good stuff.
yeah.
What else have we got here?
That was helpful, by the way. That conversation was helpful. I've been thinking about that a lot when I ride. The two different lines.
Did you see the Pink Bike poll on mixed wheels?
I did not.
So Pink Bike did a poll on mixed wheels, and it was broken up by rider size.
Okay.
And the general theme was that riders around our height, like 5'6" to 5'8" or 5'9", that was the group that had more people responding preferring mixed wheel than dual 29.
Oh, interesting. Taller had dual 29.
Taller was skewed towards dual 29, but still way more riders, even in the taller groups, way more riders prefer mixed wheels than I would say there is a percentage of bikes that are mixed wheel.
Oh, interesting.
In other words, the ratio of riders who like mixed wheel for taller, I think from a quick seat of the pants calculation, there's more riders even at the taller end of the range who like mixed wheel than there are mixed wheel bike options. I think. Because right now, really the only brands that I can think of really embracing mixed wheel for muscle bikes are Santa Cruz and Specialized. Other brands have some mixed wheel bikes, but they're not. It doesn't feel like they're really embracing it.
I agree.
Santa Cruz and Specialized are really, especially Santa Cruz.
Yeah, Santa Cruz.
And I like to think that's because we were telling them to since 2014 or 2012.
Right.
And this brings me to, again, back to another part of the conversation, which is like Chris at Pivot has this belief that the reason I like mixed wheels and the Path likes mixed wheels is because I'm short. Which I think there's some truth to that.
Right.
Right about 5'8", not quite 5'8". I think that qualifies as short.
Right.
Especially to Chris, who's like probably 6'1", 6'2".
Sure.
In my family, it's tall. My mom's 4'11".
Yeah, that's same.
So everything's relative. But I think it's true that I'm short enough to possibly influence me towards liking things that shorter people like.
Right.
And I do think that there are some benefits to the mixed wheel that are kind of more pertinent and more relevant and more needed by short people.
Sure.
But I think it's a mistake to think that there aren't benefits for taller people.
Exactly.
And the analogy that I would offer is that in the early days of 29, there was a pretty strong contingent of people who thought that 29 was just for tall people.
Right.
And I think that it is 100% true that 29 solves tall people problems that aren't short people problems.
Right. But it is also true.
So tall people needed it worse.
Right.
More. Tall people got more benefit and needed those benefits more.
Right. It resolved actual problems that tall people needed to be solved.
But it also 29, in that same Pink Bike poll, there was a huge contingent of people under 5'3" who prefer dual 29er.
Interesting.
And we know just from experience that a lot of riders at any height benefit from dual 29.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, any height being sort of relative, but like certainly very short people, much shorter than us,
right,
embrace and benefit from dual 29.
Yeah.
So I think that's a perfect analogy in that 29 really, really helped taller riders and kind of like fixed really kind of glaring problems for taller riders, but also was generally better for everybody.
Yeah.
As kind of those sorts of generalizations are always a problem.
Sure.
Just kind of in big general terms, 29 was kind of better for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think mixed wheel kind of has that same thing of like, yes, shorter riders are having more issues with getting their butts buzzed by the big wheel, and with not, if I was taller, I do think it would be, I can manual 29ers no problem.
Right.
But one of the things I like about mixed wheels, sometimes it's easier for me to manual.
Right.
I think if I was taller, the bigger rear wheel would be less in the way for me on manuals.
For the shorter people, the mixed wheel maybe helps to more efficiently brake the plane and move the bike.
Totally. It makes the rear wheel more whippable, and which again, for a taller person with more leverage and the ability to get further back and further forward and everything.
Dual 29 isn't as much of an issue for them.
Right. And maybe at a certain height, there's even a scale of like, well, maybe the ideal wheel size for you would be 32 front, 29 back, but the second best is 29 front and back, because 27 is just a little small for you.
Right.
Maybe like 6'3". I don't know what for different riders, it's a different height, I think. And Andrew's about 6'1", 6'2", and he prefers mixed wheel. So it's not like, that's a great example of a taller rider who does like mixed wheels.
Right.
And he mentioned he was riding 29 yesterday with me, and he's like, yeah, I'm buzzing my butt. I was like, well, you have long legs.
Right.
And to me, it's not, buzzing the butt is a downside of 29, but to me, it's more when I'm braking the plane and a little bit back, and I buzz my inner thigh or the inside of my leg.
Right.
That I especially don't like that.
Right.
So yeah, just shout out to Chris at Pivot. Like, you're right that I'm short. You're right that that's part of why I'm an early adopter of mixed wheels. You're wrong that means taller riders don't need to try mixed wheels too. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. I think someday you'll agree with me.
And I think that might be a podcast.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks, Hawk. Thanks, Jake. Thanks to all the riders out there who listen to the show. Huge thanks to all the coworkers here at the shop. I love working with you people. Let's all remember to love the bikes we ride.